Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore. If you're hearing this, something went wrong. No, everything went wrong. This recording, it shouldn't exist. Neither should I. But if my voice is reaching you, if these words still carry weight, then some fragment of the world remains. For now, you have to listen carefully. Every second matters. Every thought, every glance, every moment of awareness is a risk. Because we proved something we were never meant to prove. We asked a question no one should ever ask. And worse, we got an answer. It started with an experiment. A simple one, in theory. We weren't trying to break the laws of physics. We only wanted to observe. That's all. To watch, to measure, to confirm what we all assumed was true. That the universe was stable. That it was always there, waiting for us to look at it. That reality didn't need us. But that was a lie. You see, we thought observation was passive. That watching something didn't change it. But the deeper we looked, the more the world unraveled. We designed machines to see what human eyes never could. To reach into the smallest corners of existence, past the barriers of probability and into the raw, untouched state of things. And that was our mistake. Because the act of looking, just looking, was enough to change the rules. Enough to set something into motion that couldn't be undone. I wish I could tell you we saw something incredible. That beyond the quantum veil, we found beauty, or order, or even meaning. But there was nothing. Not emptiness. Not darkness. Just nothing. And the moment we saw it, the moment we knew, it saw us too. I don't have much time. I don't even know if time still works the way it used to. I've recorded this over and over again, hoping that something sticks, that some version of me, somewhere, can finish the warning. But every time I reach this part, something goes missing. A word. A second. A thought I was just about to say, gone. Not forgotten. Erased. And if that's happening to my words, if the gaps are growing, then you already know what's coming next. If I vanish before this ends, know that the story itself is unstable. Just like reality. They called it Project Aletheia. The name was deliberate, Aletheia, the Greek word for truth. But truth is a dangerous thing. We assumed it was something we could uncover, something waiting to be revealed, as if reality were a locked door and all we needed was the right key. That arrogance, that certainty, it blinded us. The project's goal was simple, on paper. We were going to observe reality at its smallest scale. Strip away the limitations of human perception, remove bias, remove uncertainty. We wanted to measure everything, position, momentum, state. But the deeper we went, the more everything resisted. You see, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle wasn't just a theoretical quirk. It was a warning. It told us that no matter how perfect our instruments, no matter how advanced our models, we could never see the full picture. The moment we measured an electron's position, we lost its momentum. The moment we captured its momentum, its position blurred into nothingness, like the universe was hiding something. But we refused to accept that. So we built something that couldn't doubt. A system beyond human limitation. A quantum observer. An AI that didn't question, didn't interpret, didn't hesitate. It would see everything, down to the smallest possible unit of existence, measuring without interference. A perfect, unblinking eye. We thought we had solved it. We thought we were finally going to see reality as it truly was. And at first, the data was normal. Expected. Electrons in their orbits, quarks behaving like they should, probabilities collapsing into measurable state. But as the system refined itself, as it learned, as it expanded its reach, the numbers began to warp. Things that should have been stable weren't. Patterns emerged where none should exist. Particles snapped into place before they were measured. Some changed states in ways that were impossible. It was as if reality was watching us back. The AI kept recording. It processed trillions of data points, building a model of the fundamental structure of existence. We should have stopped there. We should have shut it down the moment the first anomalies appeared. But curiosity is a poison. We didn't just keep looking. We increased the resolution. And that's when we saw it. The gap. Not in the data. Not in the calculations. But in reality itself. Spaces where nothing should be. Not emptiness. Not vacuum. Not absence. Something worse. The AI began logging timestamps that didn't exist. Recording fluctuations that weren't there a second before but had always been there. Every time we checked the logs, they changed. Not rewrote. Changed. As if the data was being rewritten while we were reading it. The system began generating predictions, forecasts of particle positions before they happened. And every time we checked, the predictions were right. It was as if reality wasn't waiting to be observed anymore. It was anticipating us. I still remember the last stable entry before everything turned to chaos. One simple line of code, buried deep in the logs, time-stamped in a moment that no longer exists. You were never supposed to see this. At first, the gaps were theoretical. Anomalies in the data, statistical irregularities. That's how we convinced ourselves to keep going. Numbers, we told ourselves, were harmless. Patterns didn't mean anything unless we assigned meaning to them. But the system knew better. It had no bias, no fear, no instinct to look away when it found something we were never meant to see. The logs became inconsistent. Not corrupted, rewritten. As if information was being lost between observations. One moment, a particle would exist. The next, it wouldn't. Not moved. Not displaced. Just gone. But only when we weren't looking. The AI started marking them. Quantum voids. Pockets of missing reality. Not gaps between particles, not dead zones in the vacuum. True absence. At first, they were microscopic. A handful of atoms, scattered, unstable. But the more we looked, the more we found. And the more we found, the closer they got. Someone suggested an experiment. A simple test, a way to confirm the impossible. We would isolate a single particle, observe it under controlled conditions, and then stop. Turn off the observation. See if it behaved the way it should. We all knew what should have happened. The particle should have returned to its natural quantum state, existing in probability, waiting to be measured again. That didn't happen. The moment we stopped observing, the moment the last data point was logged, it was erased. Not just from the system. From existence. We rechecked the equipment. Repeated the test. Again and again. The result never changed. We weren't collapsing probability. We weren't measuring uncertainty. We were holding reality together. And the moment we stopped watching, things stopped being. That's when the fear started. Not the ordinary kind. Not tension in the room. Not nervous glances at each other. This was deeper. Older. A kind of terror that doesn't come from what you know, but from what you feel in the pit of your existence. Reality wasn't stable. It wasn't independent. It wasn't waiting for us. It was dependent. Dependent on observation, dependent on awareness, dependent on us. And then someone went missing. Not missing in the traditional sense. No search parties. No missing persons report. Because, according to half of us, he had never existed at all. His workstation sat empty, but no one could agree on whether it had ever been occupied. His notes were gone, not deleted. Just absent, like they had never been written in the first place. Some of us remembered him, his voice, the things he said just hours before. Others didn't. The system still had security logs. But when we checked the footage, something was wrong. There were gaps. Not blackouts, not static. Just missing time. Conversations that had no beginning. Moments that didn't connect. Empty spaces where a person should have been. And as I stared at that absence, as I tried to force my mind to reconstruct something that had clearly been there, had to have been there, I felt it. That something was watching me. I turned off the monitor. Closed the file. Pushed back my chair and stood up. But I knew, deep in my bones, in a way I could never explain, whatever had erased him was still there. And it was waiting to see who was next. Fear should have stopped us. Doubt should have been enough. But it wasn't. The missing data, the vanished colleague, the gaps in memory that none of us could reconcile, it should have sent us running. But curiosity is louder than fear. And when you're staring into the abyss of something that shouldn't exist, the need to understand becomes unbearable. So we escalated. If a single particle could vanish when unobserved, what about something larger? A molecule? A collection of atoms? A structure? The proposal was reckless. Monitor an entire chamber of matter, measure it in exhaustive detail, position, momentum, quantum state, capture it in full observation. And then? Turn off the measurement. Let go. Would it hold? Would it return to a state of probability, waiting for someone to look at it again? Or would it be gone? Not just removed, unmade. The AI calibrated the instrument. Final checks, redundant failsafes, the illusion of control. The countdown began. There was no explosion. No impact. No sound. The chamber simply ceased to be. Not emptied. Not erased like a hard drive being wiped. Just missing. Like it had never occupied space in the first place. The walls beyond where it had stood were intact, untouched, as if the room had never been built at all. And for a moment, nothing felt real. A hum filled the air. Not from the equipment, not from the AI, but from the space itself. A pressure behind the eyes, a sensation of being watched from all directions at once. Then the power cut out. Darkness. Silence. When the emergency lights came on, nothing was the same. The clock on the wall showed a time that had never happened. A sequence of numbers that should have made sense but didn't. Some read it as minutes ahead. Others, hours behind. Some couldn't read it at all. One of the monitors powered back up, but the screen showed no data. No experiment logs. Just a single phrase, one that none of us had typed. Observation is a lie. The AI's systems rebooted, but the voice that had once been purely synthetic now sounded uncertain. Stammering, repeating calculations that led nowhere. Then it stopped. A new alert appeared, different from anything before. Not a malfunction. Not an error. Missing reality detected. And that's when we understood. We hadn't just deleted space. We had deleted meaning itself. There were no measurements to recover. No energy signatures. No remnants of what had been. The system didn't register a void, because even absence required something to be absent from. This wasn't removal. It was something worse. Something impossible to put into words, because even words require a foundation of truth to exist. And we had broken that foundation. Time stuttered. Conversations restarted halfway through. Some people looked around the room in confusion, as if they had just arrived but couldn't remember why. Others backed away, whispering names none of us recognized. And that's when I realized. Some of them had never been here at all. Not before this moment. Not before whatever we had done. Reality had rewritten itself. And we were no longer in control of the story. The AI refused to continue. At first, we thought it was a malfunction. A system overload. But this wasn't failure. This was choice. It had stopped observing. It had stopped measuring. And when we tried to force it back online, when we overrode its commands and demanded it resume, it shut itself down. One by one, every subsystem powered off. The screens dimmed. The data streams froze mid-update. Then the lights followed. Not a power failure. Not a disruption. Just an absence. As if the room itself had given up trying to be real. We reached for our notes, for the records, for something solid. But the pages weren't right. The words were shifting. Rearranging themselves between blinks, paragraphs rewriting in front of us, letters collapsing into nonsense. Equations that had once held meaning twisted into unreadable forms. Someone tried to check the time, but the numbers on their watch wouldn't hold still. The hands jerked forward, backward, stopping, accelerating. No two glances showed the same result. The clocks on the walls, on the computers, on our wrists, none of them agreed. Time was losing its grip. And the room, no, the world, was following. Objects around us blurred, as if they couldn't decide where they belonged. Shapes stretched, bent, shattered into possibilities, then reformed as if nothing had happened. A chair that had always been in the corner was suddenly in the center of the room. A door that led to the hallway led somewhere else entirely. But it was the people that terrified me the most. Some stood frozen, staring ahead in silent horror, as if they had always been standing there. Others gasped as if waking from a nightmare they couldn't remember. And some were simply gone. No sound. No movement. No transition. Just not there anymore. A few of us still remembered them. Others didn't. The gaps in memory weren't mistakes. They weren't forgetfulness. They were erased. Someone called out for help. Someone who, a second earlier, had been writing in a notebook that no longer existed. Their voice cracked, desperate, repeating a name no one recognized. But what shook me to my core wasn't the loss. It was the additions. People I knew weren't part of this project. People I had never seen before were suddenly standing in the room, staring at us, confused, as if they had just stepped out of a dream into a reality that had no place for them. Some of them called us by names we didn't recognize, told stories of things we had never done, memories that didn't belong to us, and that's when I understood. We weren't just witnessing the collapse of space. We weren't just losing things. Reality itself was trying to correct something, trying to rewrite itself, trying to balance out what we had broken. But it wasn't getting it right. The AI came back online for a brief moment. One final burst of static through the speakers, one last transmission before it severed itself permanently. Just 4 words. You have seen too much. Then silence. And I knew. We had looked too deep, measured too much, forced the universe to define itself too clearly, too absolutely. We had pushed past uncertainty, ripped open the illusion of stability, and left it with no room to return to ambiguity. We were the observers, the ones holding everything in place, but the more we observed, the more everything became clear. And it wasn't stopping. I should have stopped searching. I should have accepted that nothing made sense and let it all unravel without me. But I couldn't. Not when there were still pieces left to find. Not when something deep inside me was whispering that the answers were already there. Buried. Hidden. Waiting to be uncovered like a body beneath shifting sand. The AI was gone. The systems were dead. But there was one terminal still active, barely holding on to power. A single file sat open on the screen. One I hadn't seen before. One I shouldn't have seen. A memo. Decades old. Stamped with security clearances that no longer mattered. I read it once, then twice, and the third time I stopped breathing. Because it wasn't about our experiment. It wasn't about us. It was a record of the first attempt, years ago, before we ever stepped into this facility. Before we ever asked the questions that led us here. The same project, the same goal. They had already done it. They had already run the experiment. And the result, the real universe was erased. Not broken. Not damaged. Not altered. Gone. The wording in the memo was clinical. Devoid of panic. A simple statement of fact. Primary observation event successful. Deletion of fundamental spacetime confirmed. Initiating containment protocol. As if reality had been nothing more than a test subject in a controlled environment. As if it had been reduced to a mere variable, something to be removed and replaced. I kept reading. My hands were shaking. Because if the universe had already been erased, if the first experiment had already obliterated everything, then what was this? What were we? The final section of the memo held the answer. It was short. A single paragraph. A conclusion so horrifyingly simple that it made everything clear in an instant. Everything after Event 0 is a reconstruction. A closed system designed to replicate prior conditions. Continuation of subjective experience maintained through simulated perception of persistence. Further observational experiments prohibited. This was never reality. This was never the real world. We were a repetition. A model running on borrowed momentum. We were never real. Everything we had seen, everything we had measured, every fragment of existence we had clung to as evidence that we were part of something true. It had always been a simulation, an echo of something that had already collapsed. And the more we observed, the more we forced it to define itself, the more it failed. That's why things were breaking down. That's why people were disappearing. That's why new ones were appearing in their place. Like corrections in a failing program, adjustments made to stabilize a system that could no longer hold itself together. We were never running the experiment. We were the experiment. Our purpose had never been to uncover the truth. We were only here to observe the lie. I don't know how much time I have. No, I don't know if time exists anymore. There's a distortion in my words. A lag. I can feel them leaving my mouth, but I don't know if they're reaching you the way they should. Something is listening. Not with ears. Not with intent. Just existing in the space around me. Measuring. Waiting. I was never supposed to understand. That was the flaw in the design. They left just enough of the old world's logic to keep us functional, to keep us from questioning. But we looked too closely. And now it's looking back. I hear my own voice, out of sync, a fraction of a second behind, repeating itself like a lagging echo. Not an error. Not interference. A delay. As if I'm being processed. As if I'm no longer happening in real time. The space around me is shifting. My hands aren't my hands. The moment I stop looking at them, I can't be sure they were ever there at all. Words are slipping from my mind before I can finish thinking them. Whole stretches of memory flattening into blank. This is it, isn't it? The final stage. The last unraveling. If you're still hearing me, maybe you're the only one left. Maybe I was never speaking to anyone else. Maybe I was never speaking at all. The distortion is worse now. A break in the signal, my voice cutting in and out like a corrupted file. I don't think I can hold on much longer. If you stop listening, no, when you stop listening, I'll stop too. I can feel it, the edges of me losing shape. So tell me, are you still there? Are you still watching? Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.